How's it going, everyone? Cameron here with another The Good, The Bad and The Ugly. This time we're looking at Ethereum. Quick disclaimer, I do hold a position in ETH, although not as much as I once did, and the reasons for that I'll come to later on in the video. But please remember that everything in this video is not financial advice, and I am not a financial advisor. This is purely for education purposes. Please do your own research and consult a trained professional before making any investment decision. Remember also that just because I reduce my ETH, that is in no way a recommendation that you do the same. We're all at different stages of our investment journeys and we have different risk appetites. To be clear, I didn't reduce my ETH exposure because I think it's doomed. I don't think ETH is going to zero. In fact, at today's prices, it may actually be fair value. I still expect Ethereum to do well and outperform many other asset classes. What I will show you in this video is that many of the much cherished bullish narratives around Ethereum are in fact misconceptions. It's not that the narratives don't exist, they're just not as strong as what people make out. Because many of these narratives are overblown, it actually introduces a lot more risk into the ETH price than what people have perhaps factored in. And so for me, the risk reward is just not there anymore. And it just presents an opportunity cost. There's just better risk reward plays out there. Today we're going to be looking at all the good things about Ethereum, the massive institutional infrastructure that is on its way, the bad things about Ethereum, the technical debt that has introduced a lot of uncertainty into the ETH price, and then the downright ugly, the economic paradox that introduces even further uncertainty and help me realize that there's perhaps better opportunities elsewhere. Let's get started with the good. And to be fair, the good is incredibly strong. Let's start off with the institutional infrastructure that has been built out on the Ethereum ecosystem. This building out has pretty much reached a point of no return, and I don't say that because of the ETFs, I don't say it because of Wall Street or BlackRock's build product. Those are all incredible offerings in their own right, but I say it because of this.
Today, I'm very pleased to announce that we will add a blockchain-based ledger to our technology infrastructure to allow for trusted movement of tokenized value across the digital ecosystems.
The man you're listening to on your screen right now is Javier Perez Tasso, and he is kind of a big deal because he is the CEO of Swift. And Swift is to the global banking and financial economy what HTTP is to the internet. They allow the global flow of money across 200 countries and over 11,000 institutions. And who have they chosen to partner in this endeavor?
So we're working with more than 30 banks globally and building an initial prototype with Consensus.
Consensus is the company behind the MetaMask wallet, the linear layer 2 on Ethereum. They are basically joined at the hip with the Ethereum Foundation. Founded in 2014 by Ethereum co-founder Joseph Lubin, Consensus has been a part of Ethereum's journey from before the Genesis block. They incubated the first Ethereum wallet, founded early projects, and developed the infrastructure that helped Ethereum scale. So basically, Javier might as well have said, we're building out on Ethereum. Much like you can on MetaMask, I'm sure that the solution that Consensus is working on with Swift will enable multiple chain functionality. However, I'm very confident that Ethereum will be taking center stage. The probability that it is the token of choice for real world assets is really high, and he even mentions the buzz around this in his speech.
And in our industry, there's a huge buzz around the future of tokenized assets.
And it's not only Swift that are building out infrastructure on Ethereum. Check out this official X post on Ethereum's official X account dated 19th of January. Ethereum is the #1 choice for global financial institutions. Over the last few months, adoption has accelerated. Here are 35 stories of how institutions are building on Ethereum. And then it goes on to list some of those institutions, and there are some big names in there. We're talking Fidelity, Google, Santander, American Express, Stripe, JP Morgan, MasterCard, BlackRock, Coinbase, Robinhood, Morgan Stanley. The list goes on. Sounds impressive, doesn't it? And it is. But there is a catch with this. And I'll come to that in the ugly. The next good thing about Ethereum is its reliability. Ethereum has a quite remarkable record of never going down, and that is quite a contrast to its main competitors, Solana, that has a checkered history of outages, and Sui that had a 6-hour outage as recent as 3 weeks ago. If you're a major bank managing billions of dollars, uptime is not a feature, it's a requirement. Ethereum's reliability is why the likes of BlackRock have chosen to build their build fund on Ethereum. And that brings me to the next good thing about Ethereum, in that it has a strong why. It has a strong reason to exist beyond simply number go up. Listen to Vitalik talking on the Bankless podcast as recent as September 2025. What role can Ethereum play? The fundamental product that Ethereum is protecting is people's freedom and self-sovereignty, an ability to organize in a way that does not depend on any kind of mask, any kind of person or company or nation. And Ethereum is a powerful intellectual attractor for people who care about democratic modes of organizing actual work in a technological society. When I listen to Vitalik speaking in interviews and presentations, I get the sense that he actually genuinely cares about cypherpunk values. This is just my own impressions that I get when I listen to other Layer 1 founders speak that are competitors of Ethereum, that when they speak, I get the feeling they care less about cypherpunk values. Like they bandy some of the terms around like they're kind of buzzwords or boxes to tick. When push comes to shove, that they will make concessions in areas of things like decentralization, security, permissionlessness, privacy, if it meant that their number goes up. Some of these other Layer 1s had a lot of venture capital funding at Genesis and a lot of insider allocations, big insider allocations. And when you've got those two in the mix, there's just a lot of pressure to deliver a return no matter what the cost, even if that means compromising on some of the much cherished cypherpunk values. But I do genuinely feel that Vitalik will not make those compromises, and I think that's a real credit to him and Ethereum. And now we come to the bad. Here's a headline you'll often see. BlackRock now has 100 billion in crypto. BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, now has 100 billion in crypto assets, mainly Bitcoin and Ethereum. Who of us has not looked at a headline like this, myself included, and not taken a great deal of comfort? Yes, the ETH price is trending down, but look, BlackRock are in balls deep. I mean, how can it possibly fail? BlackRock are all in on this. It's too big to fail. That's the narrative we want to hear in our heads. But let me tell you the cold, hard truth about BlackRock's exposure to crypto assets. I looked at its SEC filings, I looked at its accounts, and it holds zero. Zip, zero, nothing, nada, not a blip. They hold nothing. In fact, quite the contrary. What they do explicitly state in their latest K10 is that the company does not engage in proprietary trading activities, which is just another way of saying they do not hold speculative assets, which would include Ethereum and Bitcoin. So what is this 100 billion in crypto assets then? It is made up entirely of funds that they manage through their ETFs and other products on behalf of their clients. The playbook for BlackRock and for all of Wall Street is that they come up with the products for the crypto assets and they sell them to the clients. The clients take on all of the risk and they collect the fees. They hold zero risk themselves. And you see these types of headline time and time again. Even AI thinks BlackRock owns Ethereum, but if you click on the reference, it just goes through to the ETF. In our heads, we want to believe the narrative that we are at the casino, the crypto casino, and BlackRock's right there at the table with us, with their chips in the middle. But they are not. They are not at the casino with us. They are the casino. They're the ones taking the rake. They have absolutely zero skin in the game. If Ethereum crashes down to, or the ETH price crashes down to zero tomorrow, they lose absolutely nothing. Well, they lose a revenue stream, but they probably don't even lose that because they can just sell other products to their clients. The one caveat to this is that BlackRock does disclose a minority investment in Circle, which is, of course, the issuer of the stablecoin USDC. So there's a little bit of exposure to the crypto market there, but it's not particularly large. The other caveat is that the K10 that I pulled this information from is from February 2025, so yeah, nearly a year old. So it's possible that BlackRock has made some purchases of cryptocurrencies in that time, and I guess we'll find out in the coming days when it releases its next K10. Another misleading narrative around ETFs is they're often badged or sold to us as proof of or institutional adoption. However, when you look at the SEC filings from institutions, it turns out that the amount of adoption in the ETFs from institutions is still a minority. There's websites that do track it, and they put it in a range from as low as 25% up to 46.4% is the highest that I've seen. The rest of it is likely wealthy retail investing through their fund managers. Yes, it's great that these products exist, and yes, they are rails for the future that potentially more institutions might also use, but let's not delude ourselves into believing that institutions are risk on when it comes to assets like Ethereum. The next bad thing about Ethereum is question marks over whether or not it is fit for purpose. Is it the most efficient tool for the future that we are creating? Let's hypothesize that the buzz around the growth of autonomous agents is correct, that we're only at a fraction of the volume that we're going to see through autonomous agents now, and that is just going to grow exponentially. 100, 1000x from what it is today, possibly even more. If Ethereum's chugging along now and doing okay, how is it going to handle the amount of volume that is going to come down the pipeline when autonomous agents really get going? Ethereum's answer to the scaling problem is layer 2s. You know the names: Arbitrum, Optimism, Base. But look at the architecture here. To scale, we have to introduce bridging, minting, burning, wrapping. Every single one of those steps is a point of friction. It breaks composability, and more importantly, it introduces more points of failure. Bridges are historically one of the most hacked infrastructures in all of crypto, and relying on layer 2s only increases the surface area for those attacks. Occam's razor states that the simplest solution is usually the correct one, so compare Ethereum to a project like Sui. Sui represents a genuine step change in technological edge, or at least that's how it seems on the surface. Sui uses the Move programming language and parallel processing instead of sequential like with Ethereum. It doesn't need a messy web of layer 2s to scale. If Sui needs to handle more traffic, it can do so just by adding more compute. It scales horizontally, just like the internet does. It's simple and it's elegant. Ethereum, on the other hand, is relying on non-repeatable improvements. They tweak a bit here, they shave off a bit there, but once they've done them once, they can't do them again. They have to come up with new ways, sometimes more complex ways, of keeping the engine running without replacing the chassis. The differences between Ethereum and Sui make a lot of sense when you look at their origin stories. Vitalik came from an academic background. He famously took a couple of months off from his studies to build Ethereum. He was just primarily interested in answering the question, how do I make a really good smart contract layer 1? And he did. He absolutely smashed it. It is a masterpiece of our time. Sui, however, was born from the ashes of Meta's failed Diem project. This was a battle-hardened team backed by billions of dollars of R&D, building from first principles years later. They asked a very different question. How can we build a layer 1 that can scale indefinitely to serve billions of users? They had the benefit of hindsight. They saw Ethereum's bottlenecks before they even wrote a single line of code. They built an engine for speed and scale from day one. If AI agents need a blockchain, are they going to choose one where they have to bridge assets across 5 different layer 2s and pay gas fees that can fluctuate wildly, or are they going to choose a high-speed parallel processing blockchain that just works? I'm not saying that Vitalik and Ethereum can't navigate the scaling challenges ahead of them, but what I am saying is that there's a lot of complexity introduced there, which just introduces a lot of uncertainty. And in investing, uncertainty equals risk. This is not even my biggest reservation with Ethereum though, and that I'm going to come to now. It's time for the ugly. This is a slide presented by Tom Lee at the Binance Blockchain Week. Now, what does this headline and the headline that I showed you earlier from the Ethereum X post both have in common? I believe they could benefit from one extra word, and that extra word is ecosystem, and it goes right here. Take a closer look at some of these brands. Shopify, MasterCard, Robinhood, Coinbase. These are not building out on the Ethereum layer 1. They're building their own layer 2s, or building on a layer 2. And it's a similar sort of story with the Ethereum X post. Of the 35 institutional stories, only 14 of them are actually building on the layer 1, 13 of them are building out on layer 2s, and there's some pretty big names in there. One is building out on both, and the rest are primarily ETF applications, which, as I've shown, will be mainly sold to retail customers, which is still good, but not nearly as exciting as what it looks. And the reason why all of this is important is because Ethereum has chosen Layer 2s as its scaling solution. The value is increasingly being caught by the Layer 2s, and very little of that value is filtering down to the Layer 1. That can be clearly seen in this chart here, which I took from Grayscale's report on Ethereum. As you can see, the fees for Layer 2s after the Dankun upgrade has exploded, and the amount of fees going back to the Layer 1 is only a tiny fraction. Now, I have heard Vitalik on the Bankless podcast talk about increasing the fees that the Layer 2s pay to 1 Gwei, which is about 4 or 5x from where they are right now. But even if these tiny fractions were 4 or 5 times more than what they are now, you can still see that it's not really going to move the needle. Low fees for the Layer 2s are likely here to stay. Whilst fee revenue is a big thing, and according to Grayscale, it's the main thing that institutional investors look at, it's not everything. Someone may buy ETH and hold it because they believe that it'll appreciate because of the underlying technology, the benefits that that brings. Worst case scenario, the Layer 2s cannibalize all the value off the Layer 1. Best case scenario, value and liquidity is still split across the whole Ethereum ecosystem. And this is important when we think about holding ETH the token as an investment, because simply holding ETH is not like holding an ETF to the whole Ethereum ecosystem. It's not like holding an ETF to the S&P 500, where the performance of those companies directly flows back into your ETF. To get exposure to the entire ecosystem, you would need to hold the correct weights of not only Ethereum, but also Base, Arbitrum, Optimism, Polygon, and so on. And that's why this chart from Tom and other similar narratives that you get are a bit misleading, because they imply that ETH the token is the correct tool to capture the value. I really like Tom Lee, and look, to be fair to him, when people talk about Ethereum, they do sometimes mean the Ethereum ecosystem. Nonetheless, some of the brands on this slide are in fact Layer 2s, and at the moment he is getting very little or next to no exposure to that in his treasury company, which only holds ETH, the Layer 1. It's easy to see how retail investors might also see this and think, to get exposure to all of the Ethereum ecosystem, I need to just buy ETH. But that is in fact incorrect. Despite my concerns about where the value will accrue, I actually quite like the Layer 1, Layer 2 solution philosophically. I think it was the right way to go. Keep the Layer 1 true to those cypherpunk ideals of decentralization, security, privacy, ZK proofs. Let the entrepreneurs, let the high frequency stuff happen on the Layer 2s. Vitalik himself actually alludes to this strategy when he went on the Bankless podcast late last year. I'll put a link in the description down below. But he talks about a barbell strategy for Ethereum. The Layer 1 is one end of the bar, providing all that security and trust. The Layer 2s are sold for specific use cases, high frequency trading, whatever it is. If you want to profit from all of that, then you just own those Layer 2s. Hey everyone, just a quick update from me. I filmed most of this video on the 3rd of February, then I went to bed and woke up to this X post from Vitalik, which is really relevant to what I've been discussing. In it, he basically admits that the original vision for L2s and their role in Ethereum no longer makes sense, and that they need a new path. This admission just further underscores some of the reservations I have about where the value is accruing. He also talks in this post about increasing the fees for the Layer 2s and discusses scaling solutions for the Layer 1. Now, are these solutions just a one-off that can't be repeated, some quick wins, or are they an ongoing solution so that Ethereum can scale with exponential growth? I have a feeling it's probably the former from what I understand of what he's proposing. But anyway, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. I'll also post a link to Vitalik's post down below. To return to what I said at the beginning of the video, I'm not betting on the collapse of Ethereum. It'll likely become the Microsoft of Web3. Safe, reliable, enterprise grade, it'll have its place. But as an investor, I'm looking for arbitrage opportunities, assets that have mispriced risk-reward returns. If I want safety, it's hard to see past Bitcoin, but if I want returns, there's probably better opportunities out there than Ethereum. And as I've shown, Ethereum still carries a lot of its own risks. Will the value actually ever accrue to the Layer 1, or will it just go to the Layer 2s? And as it scales, will it be fit for purpose for for the agentic economy. That brings us to the end of the good, the bad, and the ugly for Ethereum. If you've enjoyed this format of video, I've done the exact same thing for Sui and for Bittenza, and I'll leave links to those videos down below. Okay, that's it for now. If you've enjoyed this, do subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.